Jon Anik and Kenny Florian podcast. Jon Anik and Kenny Florian.
I f***ing love them. I can't get enough of them.
Let's hear that Boston next.
Big jab there from Duffy, and Frank Mir is hurt now. Down goes Duffy out cold. Frank Mir does it again. Rock'em sock'em robots here. Oh my goodness.
Hyperbole.
They're a couple of absolutely self-involved bullshit artists.
Here are your hosts, Jon Anik and Kenny Florian.
Headshot.
That's Code Red, Code Blue. Our executive producer, Cody Merrill, with a little surprise for the host today. So it's not the tightest, cleanest wipe nor cut, as he has acknowledged. But I do kind of like that new music. We just had to make sure nobody stole it. So we just had to trot it out here. We're dark next week for the holidays. So thematically, that sounds pretty good. It's great to have everybody with us. This is the 579th iteration of the Anik and Florian podcast. It is Monday, December 15th, 2025. Quick year, this 2025. Today's episode is brought to you by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Little heavy heart today. I just left my agent and dear friend Gideon Cohen's older brother Adam's funeral in Armonk, New York. What a renaissance man this Adam Cohen was. Jiu-jitsu practitioner, by the way.
Oh, I love it.
So, but last name Cohen, and his best friend gave the last eulogy and said that they called him Conan because he was a big bodybuilder, idolized Arnold Schwarzenegger, and all three of his kids spoke. And Gideon's son Levi came up and spoke and, basically just said it was the saddest day of his life. And it was a really sad morning. So I'm making a pivot here with a heavy heart and thinking about my dear friend Gideon and the entire Cohen family. One thing I wanted to say off the top about Manel Kape and mixed martial arts before I get into our lead story, which is Ilia Topuria.
Oh,
so shame on me, right? I am reactionary and I do have recency bias and I need to nip it in the bud a little bit, right? Because I'm buying Tatsuro Taira merchandise, right? I'm screaming to my neighbors here in New York who don't give a modicum of a fuck that he needs to fight Joshua Van and we need to spin this around quickly. Well, all I needed to do was just wait a few days and give Manel Kape a chance to do his thing because he has long been sort of the guy and didn't, have a recent loss like Tyra did. And I don't know if it's you or the MMA fans or Cody or Jay, my twin. Somebody's got to say to me, like, dude, like, you got to just, like, not be so reactionary in the moment because I think I'm excited, I'm passionate, and I'm sometimes too in the moment,
Yeah. Patience, Grasshopper. Patience. No, I think it also it can be further amplified when you're there watching the fight, right? You're calling the fight, you're in the moment, you feel the energy, all that stuff. So I totally get that. But yeah, I mean, Manel Kape looked awesome, and Tyra definitely is a guy that can fight for the belt and has a ton of talent. But Manel Kape, man, what a performance! Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, this is what the expectation was, that Manel Kape is sort of this type of special athlete. Daniel Cormier, his former teammate, has long talked about some of the potential for Manel Kape. But yes, you're right. I mean, I'm sitting there after UFC 323 or during UFC 323 and Tatsuro Taira after a huge win over Brandon Moreno, who has not been really finished by anybody.
Right.
He comes out to the octagon. He's sitting to my left, and, it's hard not to get excited. And then the Pantoja thing happens, and Van's the new champ. You got these young guys in their mid-20s, Van and Tyra. In steps Manel Kape. Plenty more on that coming up after we get into our lead story, which is in headlines, brought to you by Cuervo. Now's a good time to enjoy the tequila that invented tequila. So I guess a couple of lead stories when it comes to Ilia Topuria, one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world, the, at least at this point in time, still undisputed lightweight champion. I have a statement from him, and then we have some comments from him as well that he told to Marca. Did I pronounce that right? The Spanish magazine?
What is it called?
Marca?
I think that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Just making sure.
Marca. You can roll the R's if you want. I mean,
so here's the statement from Ilia Topuria, and I will read it quickly. Maybe you go to that 1.5 speed if that applies on the audio, folks. This is Ilia Topuria. Over the past several weeks, I have made the difficult decision temporarily to step away from defending my title. This was not a decision I took lightly. However, when circumstances arise that threaten your personal integrity, your family, and your reputation, there comes a point when you must address them directly. In recent months, I have been subjected to severe and unacceptable pressure, including threats to disseminate false allegations of domestic abuse unless financial demands were met. These allegations are entirely unfounded. The truth is not a matter of opinion. It is a matter of evidence. And he goes on to say that all relevant evidence has been carefully preserved and documented. But Kenny, this is a heavy circumstance with which the lightweight champion is dealing. And some of the competitive stuff that we are going to get to is sort of secondary. But this is some serious personal life stuff. And, at least as far as his mixed martial arts career is concerned and the defense of his lightweight title, that all takes a backseat to this very pressing issue right now.
Relationship troubles are never easy to deal with, especially, when there's kids involved and crazy allegations being thrown at you. And, I'm curious to see how it's all going to play out. And it's easy to see or understand why, he's delaying his competition, his career right now. So many things can happen outside of the cage, and to bring something like that with you, it's not an easy thing when you're facing killers out there, and guys who are hungry, guys who want to take your belt. And if you're not at 100% or close to it, mentally, physically, spiritually, you will lose. This is the most difficult sport in the world. So I feel for Ilia there, and hope he gets it all sorted out in the near future.
The sport is so hard, and combat sports are so hard that even were he to come back and suffer defeat, it might just be because the opponent was better on that night. It might have nothing to do with this,
Sure.
But this is something that he's going to have to forge through and sort of deal with. And perhaps it'll be something that he's buoyed by in training potentially. It certainly can be spun to the positive, but
right.
There are a lot more headlines about the boxing stuff that he talked about. So I'm going to present you with that, not now, but right now. It's no secret I've always wanted to try my hand at boxing, Topuria told Marca, but I think something I've always applied to my life is that if you try to catch two rabbits, you end up catching neither. So I want to finish my story in MMA first, and once I'm done, then make my complete transition to boxing. I can't be preparing for an MMA fight, then leave, prepare for a boxing match, come back. I don't think that would be very professional, would it? Because boxing requires a completely different approach, very, very, very different training that I have to adapt to. Obviously, the timing's different, and it's not even an octagon, it's a ring. He closes his comments by saying, I'll make my transition to boxing and I'm going to surprise more than a few people. So there's a lot to get excited about. There's a lot to, I think, as a UFC fan, maybe to be alarmed about if you were thinking about some amazingly long future for Ilia Topuria in MMA. Mm-hmm. I think the promotion over the last half a decade has sort of jostled. Is that the word? They've sort of tried to figure out how to handle these double champs, or two division champions, I guess is probably the right verbiage. And you have an Ilia Topuria that desires to be a 3-division champion, and yet how is that good at all if you're the UFC when you read comments like this? So I'm curious what you make of these comments and, how it might potentially affect Ilia Topuria's long-term tenure or not with the UFC.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if he's trying to create leverage within mixed martial arts, meaning if he's trying to say, hey, I'm thinking about leaving in an attempt to maybe get more money somehow to stick around in mixed martial arts. I don't know. Or it just might be that he is serious about competing in boxing. And when you look at his style as a mixed martial artist, obviously he leans on his boxing a lot. And he has won many fights with his hands against the best in the world. And I think that from what I've seen in mixed martial arts, I think he has the best chance out of anybody to do extremely well at a high level in boxing. I also think he'd probably take a smarter approach and not just, facing a current champion for his first fight. I think he would probably, have fights leading up to that. But, we haven't seen a whole lot of people do that and accomplish, being a world champion in both sports. I think there's very few people that could do that. Is Ilia good enough in just boxing to be able to do that? I don't know. We'll see.
Lot to unpack there, right? Part of the rub certainly is how he would do in that type of setting. And, I think there are a lot of fighters, right? The recently retired Dustin Poirier would love his chances in a boxing realm. I don't know how many fights he has left on his UFC contract or if that opportunity would even be afforded him. I don't know how much Chris Weidman was going to make this weekend to box Anderson Silva, who is boxing Tyron Woodley on the undercard of this Anthony Joshua Jake Paul event, right? But there's certainly a lot of financial gain there. Perhaps it's a leverage play by Ilia Topuria. He is a grappler and a lifelong martial artist. So I think a big part of my takeaway is hopefulness that this will not be the case, that we will get over 4.5 more UFC fights from Ilia Topuria, who is in his fighting prime and a lot of people's pound for pound best MMA fighter in the world. I am an MMA fan more than I am a boxing fan at this stage of my life, personally and professionally. So I certainly would love to see Ilia Topuria realize greatness potentially in MMA, but it's undeniable what he could do in boxing, not just in terms of competition, but also financial gain. So it's a very interesting conversation, and just thought we'd bring you a few minutes on it. By the way, it is interesting, Anderson Silva versus Tyron Woodley this weekend, and I will get to Anthony Joshua and Jake Paul as well. But what does it even mean, right? So oftentimes when I talk to my twin brother, we talk about bouts of consequence, right? And Anderson Silva versus Tyron Woodley in 2025, Kenny, it's consequential for their wallets, for their health, for their families, well-offedness and well-being. It is not a bout of consequence in combat sports. It doesn't mean anything for the sport of boxing or any belts or whatever. So that's sort of, I love T. Wood. He's a friend. He's plus 175 this weekend on the DraftKings Sportsbook application. Anderson Silva's minus 225. But Kenny, this was never your path.
No, no. This is interesting. I think making a name for yourself, and no matter what the sport is, leads to a lot of other opportunities. And for mixed martial artists, a lot of former pros, it's like they have an opportunity to make more money in boxing, right now, which is crazy in some ways. Obviously, these aren't just any mixed martial artists. These are guys that have, achieved the highest levels. Anderson Silva, of course, a guy who many consider the GOAT because of what he accomplished in the middleweight division. Tyron Woodley, former welterweight champion for a while. So, you have to accomplish a lot in mixed martial arts to go into boxing, in my opinion. But, these guys are, obviously past their primes and trying to make some money. And I hope they do. I hope they do make a lot of money.
Yeah, no, all indications are that it'll be a great payday and hopefully a competitive fight and hopefully a good showcase for both men. I don't know what their training camps have held. Anthony Joshua is minus 1,200, Jake Paul plus 700, Ken Flo. I don't know if that gets into the window or not.
Yeah, that's going to be tough. I think Jake Paul has his hands full there. Everyone's got a puncher's chance, I guess, in that division, but it's not like he's the bigger, stronger guy. It's not like he's got some kind of longer reach or, that's really tough. Yeah, I have a hard time believing that Anthony Joshua is going to lose that fight, but we've seen him hurt and knocked out before. Is Jake Paul going to be the guy to do it? I'm not sure he's got the skills or the power, something that maybe Anthony Joshua hasn't seen before. But I don't know. And again, in regards to, am I going to be curious enough to tune in? Like, does that have my attention to make me want to buy the pay-per-view and want to watch? Nah, not really.